Together. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Alright, so last week Krishna was telling Arjuna 3 reasons not to worry, 3 reasons not to grieve. Because Arjuna was, as we know, is in an existential position. He didn't know whether, or she didn't know whether to proceed, progress forward, to retract back, to stay. And to Arjuna, neither of the options seemed to be viable. None of them seemed to be something that, when done, it would produce either a win situation. And what Arjuna doesn't understand is that whichever way Arjuna proceeds, he cannot win. That's the primary qualification for what we're speaking of, and that is, no matter which way you go, forward, backwards, or stay, there is no winning here. There is only duty. And that's what Krishna was telling Arjuna. We have to go forward with what we're being confronted with, whether we like it or not. Because what happens is our vasanas, our likes and dislikes, they come in the way, and then they justify, they make it seem like, well, this doesn't seem to be like a viable option. And so based on my dislikes, I choose not to proceed. But Krishna was telling Arjuna he has to proceed, or she has to go forward, because it is what Arjuna is being confronted with in the moment, and it's what Arjuna needs in order to move forward with his spiritual evolution. So now the problem is, Arjuna believes, as he was looking at the army, that I am the body and the mind. That's a typical worldly person. I am this body, and therefore that idea, that ignorance, gets projected onto the world. Therefore, thus, so is everyone else a body and a mind. So that's what Arjuna's problem is, that he, looking at these armies, and he said to himself, how can I kill? What about all of their families? What about their wives and children who no husband is going to return home? I cannot get myself to do this, because then he was, so you can see Arjuna is thinking about sort of, he's a sattvic seeker. He's also rajasic, he's very erratic. And so by that understanding, Arjuna couldn't go forward, because he was sincerely thinking about their families, our families, and everyone else. But then Krishna hears Arjuna and says, don't worry, because, number one, everything is consciousness. So what that means is that Arjuna is obviously looking at this position from a standpoint of, I am the body, and therefore there is a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an ending to me. But Krishna is speaking from a standpoint of understanding that Satya Sarvam Brahmaha, that everything is eternal, everything is one. And Arjuna is not separate from that. But Arjuna doesn't see that. He cannot understand that. So, and number 2 is that Krishna says to him, don't worry, because even if you die, even if you get hurt, in whatever way that is, you'll simply get another body. That means Ishvara, too, the Creator, is going to supply you with another body. So what is there to grieve? Because obviously our problem with moving forward, or that is to progress with life, is that we're afraid of death. And that is one of the biggest points that suppresses us from moving forward. Because whether it's a subtle death or a physical death, when that is in a jiva, that is when that is a fear that remains unaddressed, that means a survival instinct will kick in, and certain actions won't go forward because it implies that's the end of me. That's the end of what? That's the end of the body and the mind. So you can see how much problems Arjuna is having just by the simple mere belief that I am the body and the mind. So that's why Arjuna is trying to get her out of this illusion. And the third reason is, Arjuna says, what is real never That means what is real? What is real is Brahman, consciousness, awareness, never ceases to be. In other words, it is all pervasive, and you cannot destroy what pervades everything. That means it's in between all the molecules, all the atoms. The entire world is pervaded by this principle, Sarvam Brahma, that is, everything is consciousness. So those are the three reasons that Krishna says to Arjuna. And he also makes a very nice statement, as you remember. He says, you and I and all of these kings have always existed and will exist forever. Now, why would Krishna say that? Obviously, he's saying that from the understanding, from the standpoint of the self. I am eternal, I am all pervasive. Okay, so if there's any questions about this so far, let me know before we go deeper into the next section. All right. Now, the second part is the zero-sum game. This was a qualifier, but not only a qualifier for the seeker, it's also just affirming the reality of Maya. And it really just means that for every upside, there is an unseen downside. And for every downside, like a divorce or a breakup, there is an unseen upside. For example, the person is freed now to move forward with their life. It's very common. We think it's over, we're totally destroyed emotionally, mentally. But then in the retrospect, in the future time, we say that was the best moment that could have happened to me because it allowed me to move forward. So Arjuna doesn't understand this, but Krishna is telling him that all happiness, that means whatever Arjuna was expecting out of this Kauravas and Pandavas situation, however Arjuna was expecting it to turn out, Arjuna couldn't win. Right? So that means that Arjuna had an expectation. But no matter how the expectation turns out, the expectation will be against his favor either way. That's the problem with Maya. That means you cannot win here. That's why Krishna says that the wise do not grieve for the living or for the dead. Because the wise see both the living and the dead as just pure consciousness. But the samsari sees the living as a body and also sees himself or herself as the body. So there's an investment to preserve that body by what? Applying certain likes and dislikes in order to continue the preservation of that body. Okay. Now, Krishna says all happiness and success attempts fail. That's basically the summary of zero-sum game. So that means that, okay, let's ask, why is all attempts to gain happiness, why did they all fail? Let's discuss that.
Because ultimately it's temporary.
It's temporary. That's the first and the most obvious. If we have, and some people it's very obvious for some of us, but some of us it's actually not. And that's called a samsari, is that they just, the typical spiritual marketplace. They do one, practice, and then they talk about it, and then they jump into another one, and they talk about if that's the next best thing, and then they jump into another one, and they just keep hopping like a frog from one little tadpole to another. So we have to understand that everything is changing, so ultimately nothing is going to remain the same. And that's the existential crisis that every human being actually suffers. We want what? Permanent satisfaction, but Maya doesn't provide that. And furthermore, the reason why happiness cannot be gained, that is lasting in this world, is because the Jiva means living entity, that means consciousness is taking on a form of the gross body, the subtle body, and the causal body. That's a Jiva. So when consciousness takes on this principle, the gross, the subtle, and the causal, that's called a living Jiva. So the Jiva does not create its world. Like, what did you actually create here? Like, what did you actually create? If you think about it, did you create, let's say, the sun? We enjoy the sun, no doubt, but did you create the sun? do you create? Did you even create? Did you even decide how the body is going to? That you're going to have 5 fingers, you're going to have a mouth to talk, ears to listen, senses, an intellect to think. Did you even like manufacture any emotion that's released from the the hippocampus, the emotion producing organ? Did you even do that? No. In other words, we're completely what? We are completely Ishvara's creation, and therefore the entire world is also Ishvara's creation, and for that reason the Jiva doesn't really create anything, which means that Jiva actually has no control over its creation. And this is a kick in the nuts for the ego, because the ego loves to hear that you absolutely have control, and I can just give you law of attraction, the secret, and you're just going to snatch that up like there's no tomorrow. That's why they make millions of dollars. And yet when we come to Vedanta, we hear clearly you have zero control. Now understand, from a Jiva's point of view, it looks like you have free will. It looks like you're moving things and deciding and talking and sitting here, and you chose to come here. But actually, in actuality, from an Ishvara 2's point of view, you have zero control. It's just Ishvara 2 animating the entire show, and all that's, and the only principle because of which this show is known for is because of what? Consciousness, yourself. Okay, so, and as you said, all is changing, it doesn't last. Now, let's go into the mechanics why happiness cannot be gained in the world. Okay, we said it cannot be, but now let's say somebody asks why, so let's investigate. When consciousness is under the spell of Maya, okay, so I'm going to pause there. What does it mean to say consciousness is under the spell of Maya? What is consciousness? Consciousness, we discussed, is you, self. And what is Maya? We'll discuss Maya in incredible detail in later sessions. For now, Maya is latent, dormant power in consciousness. That means it's a power unexpressed. So that means just like when you go to sleep, in you, the sleeper, comes a what? A power of the dream. That means what? That power of the dream was completely dormant and latent in you, and then when the circumstances were right, that is, the bed was there and you let the waker go, then what? This power contained in you appeared in the form of the dream. Similarly, this entire world creation is what? A power in consciousness. When the situation is right, then what? The whole world appears. So now, what is Maya specifically? Maya is a power. What kind of power? A power of, number one, all power and all knowledge. All power means the power to create. And all knowledge means all knowledge about everything. For example, how do you have a knowledge about a tree? Who creates that? Where is that tree knowledge coming from? Who says that the tree is going to look like a tree, it's going to have roots, it's going to grow when the rain falls, and it's going to spread branches, and then have certain leaves and grow in a certain shape, so tall? Who decides how tall the grass is going to grow? Who decides, who sets up the seasons? Who sets up the exact gravity in order to keep us what? Not too floaty, not too grounded to the earth. Who sets up the exact amount of distance between the sun and the earth in order for the earth to harbor the exact conditions for life? Who sets all that up? All knowledge. So yes, the Christians got it right. It is an intelligent design, basically. So that means that Maya is two powers dormant, latent in consciousness. All power, that is power to create. Just like the dreamer is contained the power to create the dream, and all knowledge. Just like in the dreamer, or out of the dreamer, the one sleeping in bed, comes the dream. Now, what is the dream made of? The dream is made of what? Knowledge That's how you see the content of the dream. The dream has certain texture, quality, animation. There's characters in the dream. It surely looks like what? An intelligent design, an intelligent creation. And so what? Now you say, so what if there's all knowledge? Who actually creates and moves this knowledge? Because you can have an idea, right? But what happens if you gotta what? You gotta take that idea and create something out of that idea. So that means that's all power. It takes all knowledge and transforms it into a tangible, visible world of the five senses. Okay? So now let's get back the thread all the way back to the statement, when consciousness is under the spell of Maya, it does what? In your personal experience, in everyone's personal experience, it creates a sense of incompletion. That is, I am not whole and complete. I am inadequate, I am small, and I am just a nobody. Or I play my little part here, but that's all I am. The masters are over there. They're these great masters, but I'm not one of those. I am just a small person. That is a typical samsari knowledge or belief. So there's a little picture here, incompletion, 2 + 2, and then we don't know the answer. And then when we don't know the answer, we feel like what? We feel agitated. I want to know the answer, right? So we then go seeking. Why? Because inherently, Brahman is what? Whole and complete. That's why every action that a jiva does is what? A sense of completion. It's a action to try to complete itself, because we don't know why we're doing these actions. But if you inquire, it's what? Because you're seeking completion. You're seeking freedom from limitation. That's how jivas feel. We feel limited. And every action that we do is what? An attempt to free ourselves from that limitation. And then in order to do that, we do what? We go and pursue the world. So, pursuing the world is when Maya is operating and apparently hides consciousness. The natural result of that is the jiva then what? Goes and searches for a relationship in the hopes to complete itself, goes and makes money in the hopes to complete itself. Why? Because the jiva feels lonely. And then the jiva's thinking is, if I get into a relationship, that loneliness is what? I'm going to be free of the loneliness. In other words, the jiva is what? Trying to free itself from a sense of limitation, from the emotion that it's trying to get away from, in the form of what? Attaching itself to the worldly objects out of the wrong assumption that by the gaining of that, I will remove this limitation. And it works for a while, but not for a long time. All right. So now let's trace this back into 4 simple steps to make it very clear why jivas pursue. What is the logic behind pursuing things? Okay, so we talked about that a jiva chases objects. Now, question. Why do people do? Do people do, well, let's be personal. Do you do to do, or do you do to enjoy? Would you to enjoy? Even if you say, I'm not enjoying, I'm just serving the world, it's not about me. Well, why are you serving the world? Why are you helping? You're helping because it pleases you to help to help the world. Or why are you giving? Why are you being of service? Because it pleases me to be of service. In other words, we cannot get away from the simple observation that every action is what? To enjoy ourselves as a result of doing that action. That is what drives and motivates every single jiva in the world. Who do you find doing for the sake of doing? No way. It's either to enjoy instantaneously or at some future point. That's the only 2 options. Out of based on likes and dislikes. At least I have a certain expectation, and so what? Then I will pursue that object in the world out of what? The hopes that when it's fulfilled, my expectation will come true. Therefore, what? I will gain freedom from the limitation that I feel at that moment. Okay, so in other words, we do, summary, we do to enjoy. So now here's the next question. What do you do when a mosquito bites you? We scratch. Okay. So that means what? Why do we scratch? Obviously, there's something on me. We'll stay at the point of view of the body. There's something on me. That means what? A certain desire, a certain something that I know doesn't belong to me is on me. So what? Out of the hopes to get rid of that, I what? I agitate the desire. In other words, there is something on me, and that something is causing me to what? Pursue that in the hopes to what? Remove that. In other words, I scratch in order to get rid of the desire to scratch. I get a relationship to be free of the desire for love. I go and make money to be free of the desire to be free of insecurity. I go and get on a health program to be free of the sense of smallness in the world. That means there's actually a nice phrase in, I think it's in Irish, they say there's sadness on me. It's very clever. There's sadness on me. Not I am sad, but there's sadness on me. So just like there's a mosquito bite on me, there's a desire on me, what do? I agitate the desire. I pursue the worldly object in the hope to remove the desire. So it's pretty funny. That means what? People copulate just to get rid of the desire to copulate. Basically. That's what it's like. That's a man and a woman, they're having a very nice time, and then they're feeling itchy. There's an itch on them. So what? They have to scratch their desire, in order to get rid of their desire to scratch their desire. What's the only other reason? In other words, we jivas inherently, we don't know why, identify with what? Freedom. And every action that we do is what? Just an attempt to free ourselves from what we inherently know doesn't belong to us. What doesn't belong to us is the desire for this, desire for that, desire for that, desire for everything. We want to get rid of that. And the only way we try to get rid of that is what? By pursuing that. Which is kind of a paradox, isn't it? But it doesn't work. Because how long, when you stop scratching, when you stop scratching the mosquito bites, does it itch for a couple of seconds? No, right? There's a little bit of a temporary relief. So when you stop scratching, then there's what? A relief. But it doesn't last, does it? There's a what? A couple of seconds you want to scratch it again. So this is what's called samsara, which is why we put a wheel here that is constantly spinning the wheel in a little rat race, thinking I'm doing something, but I'm actually doing nothing. So that's why we're analyzing this process to help us become aware what causes us to go and chase. So now let's break this down into 4 steps. First of all, an object is gained, whether it's a relationship, a house, money. Usually that's all our conversations are about if you think about it. You go to a social meeting, a wedding, or a divorce, or a funeral. It's all about what? Relationships with other people. It's all about my life situation. It's all about who I'm with, who I'm no longer with, what somebody else said. It's just so predictable, isn't it? So, the object is gained, whatever it is. In this case, we'll take a relationship. It's a very common one. Then what happens once the object is successfully gained? Then we start to enjoy ourselves, right? There's an enjoyment. Why? Because now I have temporarily removed the agitation for that object. In other words, the mind or the subtle body, the mind, intellect, and the ego is no longer agitated by the desire to pursue. And then what happens is the self, the bliss, Satchit Ananda, the bliss is revealed, which was always there all along. Meaning what? The only principle that is preventing that ananda from being known as self is what? Just a bunch of desires. Which is what? A desire is a fear. A desire is a positive fear. A fear is a negative desire. In other words, I want a relationship because I don't want to be lonely. I fear poverty because I want money. In other words, fear and desire, they're like twins. They're never separate. Wherever there's a fear, there's a desire right behind it. And mostly it remains unaddressed or unacknowledged. But why would I desire unless what? I fear of not getting what I believe that I need to feel complete. So that's another cautionary sign of desire. That means whenever we desire, we are simultaneously fearing without knowing it. And that is what? Rajas is the passion, that is the energy of movement, and then tamas is the veiling power. Or you could say rajas is the projecting power. That happens all the time in relationships. We just project onto the partner, we project onto the world, we project onto our colleagues. All of our stuff gets projected. That's rajas. Or you also know those very dull people, you try to speak to them and they're just like, huh? I don't know, man. I guess so, yeah, whatever. In other words, there's nothing much to add to the conversation. They're just sort of dull. That's tamas, when the person is covered with tamas. Okay, so these rajas and tamas are present, but they suspended temporarily when the object of desire is gained. And therefore then the pure sattvic, subtle body gets revealed, upon which the eternal awareness you was always shining on, and then you get to experience yourself in the form of joy. So do you see the mechanics so far? Okay.
Does this relate to the laughing Buddha that you showed? Full, one who feels full and there's no more to take. The self is revealed.
That's right.
All the time.
That's right. So in other words,
so don't seek for happiness again.
That's right.
We have revealed the.
So yes, you can be fully self-realized, but you can still one can still not just be joyful because they still have rajas and tamas. So in other words, the sadhana is required to purify the rajas and tamas so that the full joy of self can be known. This is actually called stage 7. We're going to get into there's 7 stages of enlightenment from the Panchadasi text by Swami Vidyaranya. And so in your case, the laughing Buddha is a symbol of there's no worries. There's nothing to worry about. That's a samsari thought. I'm always worried about one thing or another. I'm worried about relationships, money, about tomorrow, how it's going to work out. I'm worried about my parents. I'm worried about how to live the next day, survive. But moksha means I'm not worried about anything because Ishvara is always providing. And Ishvara always was providing in the first place. And that's what the laughing Buddha knows directly. It's not an intellectual thought apart from the Buddha. It is the actuality, the embodiment of that knowledge. Because remember, Sarvam Brahma, that means nothing is two here. There is only me. There is only consciousness. So then how can I worry about if there's just me? If you are not separate from me, if the cockroach is not, so what am I worrying about trying to make the world work if, first of all, the Jiva doesn't have any control over it, and second of all, it's all operated by Ishvara. All right. So then step 3 is when there is enjoyment of the object, the natural assumption is, thus, the joy of the self, the joy comes from what? The object. And that's where what happens is the process of attachment or dependence develops. That's why whenever we experience something pleasant amidst or in the proximity of another, we mistakenly assume that the joy we get comes from them. So then we get attached, or we get attached to the business. We think that the money is giving me the self-confidence, or we think that our children are giving me the joy worth living, or we think that the environment is, nice house and just a nice environment is giving me the joy. In other words, what? There is an attachment and a false, mistaken identity to the object, when in actuality that joy is coming from you, the self. In fact, the self is the bliss that makes what? The world blissful. Is the joy that makes the world joyful. Is the beauty that makes the beauty beautiful. Is the what? The immense the wonder, the beautiful wonder of all that is comes from what? The self. But the samsari thing comes from the world. So then the samsari attaches onto that object. Okay, so this is the dynamic of how a jiva mistakenly associates its joy to an object. And then of course, because now there's an attachment, it causes what? Now I have to maintain what I got. Which does what? It reinforces fear. And what do we say? Fear and desire are always together. In other words, it not only reinforces rajas and tamas, which are the two energies preventing moksha, but it now causes me to what? Maintain what I got out of what? A fear of losing what I got. So that means now I have what? Gotten myself even deeper into samsara, out of that false association and attachment that the joy is in the object. Okay, any question about this entire, or any disagreements or doubts?
When there's a tendency to prolong an experience, an enjoyable experience, say lovemaking, does that happen because the self is being revealed during that experience, or why does that happen?
Sure. Okay. So the process of lovemaking, why is it enjoyable? In other words,
well, I mean, people don't do that just to remove the
yeah.
desire. I mean, they tend to want it to continue. You know what I mean?
Sure. Because it's because while a doer does, in other words, they're doing the copulating for the sake of enjoying themselves. Now let's just remove them together. We'll remove them like in the middle. We'll remove them, and then what happens? They get agitated. Why did they get agitated? It means what? In other words, they were together out of what? The enjoyment of the self. So that means when they're together, they have temporarily suspended the veil and the projection, and then what? The pure sattva is revealed. And as soon as you put them apart, now what happens? That agitation comes back. So they want to come back together. So that means that, if you look at all the relationships, my God, it's just all totally dependence. Most of it is just dependence out of this false notion. But that means, as you said, the laughing Buddha's case, that rajas and tamas has been through sadhana, through practice, worked on sufficiently that there's just what remains is a pure sattvic reflecting mirror. And so it's constantly reflecting the joy of the original awareness, that is original awareness. Okay? Now we're going to talk about the reflected awareness, original awareness, and the difference between them in the later sessions. For now, I'm going to tell you just the basics. Look at original awareness at just the original light, the light that illuminates the world. Now, as soon as Maya comes into the picture, Maya is what? A latent, dormant power in consciousness, remember? As soon as Maya uses these two powers called all power and all knowledge and goes into manifest, that's called Ishvara. Okay? So now we know the difference between Maya and Ishvara. Maya is dormant, and when that dormant power manifests, that's called Ishvara. Now never mind about Ishvara 1 and 2. It's just called Ishvara. That's the original teaching. If you want to call it Ishvara 2 for the sake of clarity, you can say Ishvara 2. Okay? So, All right. So, let's go on to further investigation why the joy is not in the object. All objects are value neutral. That means for one person, a particular food is valuable, but for another person, that same food is repulsive. For one person, a particular body shape is attractive, but for another person, that same body shape is not so attractive. For one person, a particular piece of knowledge is attractive, let's say the area of geography, but for another person, it's just there's no interest. They're interested in art, they're interested in mathematics, they're interested in science. So that means if the joy was in the object, then everyone would find the joy in that same object. But that's not true, is it? Only you find joy in that object. Why? Through our likes and dislikes, our vasanas. That means the joy cannot be in the object. Our vasanas, our raga, dvesha, our attractions, repulsions, project value onto the object, and then we call that is worth pursuing or that is not worth pursuing. You see? So that means all desire for objects is just a projection of one's likes and dislikes. All right. So now, what is the solution? Before we move on to the scripture. The solution is to shift our thoughts from the body-mind, that is, I am the small body-mind intellect, I am my karma, I am my vasanas, my likes and dislikes, to original awareness, not reflected awareness, because, as I said earlier, the original awareness, when it shines, that light that it shines, that's called reflected. Now, when the reflected awareness hits onto a medium, you could say a mirror, because that mirror, remember the mirror now is Ishvara, right? Creation. Because that mirror is now contaminated by the reflecting medium called your subtle body, which is your mind, intellect, and ego, then what? The original awareness mistakes itself for the content in the mind, intellect, and ego. Following? So I'm going to explain that again. Imagine there's a mirror. This mirror is called Ishvara. Ishvara 2, okay? And then we have the original awareness. That's Brahman. Now, yes, some of you are going to say, I know some of you are advanced, you're going to say that's duality. For the sakes of helping the mind to understand, I'm splitting them apart. So now the original light is shining onto the what? Onto the creation called Ishvara. Now, Ishvara is what? The same order of reality that the Jiva is in. Because remember, Ishvara is Mithya, apparent reality. So that means the Jiva and Ishvara too are in the same orders of reality. Now, because the Jiva, person, has certain thoughts, certain emotions from conditions of their life, that means what? They're contaminated by those conditions, those thoughts, those ideas, those emotions. But guess what? Now the light is always shining, isn't it? So now because the light and the Jiva subtle body gets entwined, the I, original, claims I am what? The condition of the subtle body. In other words, I am small, I am beautiful, I am ugly, I am peaceful, I am joyful, I am, I am smart, I am clear, I am ignorant, I am knowledgeable. All of these labels belong to what? And are experienced in where? The subtle body. In other words, what's contained in the subtle body has nothing to do with the original light. But because the original light is shining onto the subtle body, they get entwined, sarvam brahmaha, everything is one, and because what? consciousness pervades everything, including your thoughts and your intellect and your mind. Therefore, the natural assumption is, I am this, whatever thought is appearing. I am this, whatever emotion is appearing. I am this body. So that's how that confusion gets mixed. Okay? We're going to talk very detailed about this further, for future sessions. If you haven't got it, that's okay, but we're introducing it slowly. So, the solution is to shift our thoughts from this subtle body, from this jiva, which is the gross body, the subtle body, and the causal body, or the 5 sheets. We're going to talk about 5 sheets sooner or later, to original awareness. Not reflected. Why? Why not reflected? The reflected is what? See reflected awareness? Reflected awareness is the I am. Nisargadatta Maharaj calls us the I am sense. Why can you not shift your identity to the I am? Because, what do we say? Ishvara and Jiva are in the same orders of reality. That means wherever there's a reflection, that's exactly where there's what? A subtle body. Because remember, all of your experiences are what? In your mind and your intellect. Which is what? The realm of mithya. So therefore, I cannot put my attention on the I am. I need to what? Go even beyond that and understand myself as the original light which illuminates the I am sense. Okay? Alright, so. And shift your thoughts according to isness, because isness is just what is versus what I would like it to be according to my likes and dislikes. That's what we do. That's what rajas, that's what projecting power does. I see a person and maybe they have a certain skin color and my dislikes from my past says if they're, whatever, yellow, black, blue, purple, then I do not like them. So then I project my dislike onto them. It's just so predictable. In other words, these likes and dislikes are the cause of jiva's sufferings because it causes the jiva to be out of alignment with isness of reality. All right. And another very interesting point to note is that even I too means Ishvara too, in other words, Ishvara too, the creator. Even Ishvara too doesn't care about what you want. That's actually such great news to hear. Because why? What I want, as we said, is based on my likes and dislikes. In other words, only I care what I want. Only I care what I don't want. You don't even care. Let alone the great total whose job is what? To take care of the total. That's what Ishvara 2 is. It takes care of everything and everyone equally. No one is more special than someone else. In fact, my teacher James very beautifully puts it. He was once in Tirumalai in India, and he was busy teaching the course, Vedanta. And a mosquito came and bit him and gave him malaria. And when malaria hits, you gotta take about 30 days to cure those buggers, because the way they hide during daylight, they only come out when there's night. So that means what? Ishvara takes care of the mosquito no more than someone who is fully realized. Nobody gets exclusivity here in this world. And yet the jiva's ego thinks, no, I am special, I deserve privileges. Zero. You are no more special than a mosquito. Tell this to a samsari, right? They're going to just blow off. But that's what we're here to tell you. That means that even if I want moksha, Ishvara doesn't care. You know why? Ishvara 2. Because Ishvara 2 doesn't see you as unenlightened. Only you see yourself as unenlightened. Ignorance belongs to the jiva, not to the total. If I don't know, that is what? Relative to me, the jiva. Ishvara 2 or Ishvara 1 has nothing to do with my knowledge or my ignorance. That means what? The only thing that we can do is create certain situations which force Ishvara 2 to facilitate those actions. That's what Ishvara 2 is. It's a facilitator of Jiva's actions. In other words, if I study the scriptures and I get invested into this work, then what? I'm creating situations, karmas, actions, which then Ishvara is obligated to fulfill. But likewise, if I go to a nightclub and I start talking and socializing and just, worldly stuff, then guess what? Ishvara is so kind, it's going to give me exactly what my actions are asking. That means grace is earned. Moksha doesn't come by accident. It is earned through what? Your efforts. Now, simultaneously, yes, it's also grace, but simultaneously, you also have what? Through your actions, full, quote, control to ask Ishvara by your actions to what? To facilitate the results of your actions. You understand? So that's why we say, yes, you can come to class and you can study Vedanta all you want, but ultimately, what? Ishvara 2 is the creator, the whole is what? The one that's going to, quote, give you moksha, give you the moment when, well, not moment, but just the understanding or the ignorance, the final ignorance that has caused me to confuse myself with what? Everything else, or to separate myself from everything else. So that means grace is earned, simultaneously Ishvara is the one that provides the grace. How? Through my actions. Okay. Now, identity may shift back, of course. This happens very often in the spiritual world. Now I have total clarity about who I am. Everything's clear. That's called pure sattva. But then Rajas and Tamas comes up, and then what? Just total veiling. Now I just don't know. And then the unfortunate thing is the Jiva takes it very personally and they go, oh, I must be, it's my fault. But the fact is, guys, we just said you don't control anything. These three forces, Sattva, Tamas, and Rajas, are operating constantly. And see, they're above the Jiva. In other words, what? The Jiva is completely subject to the three gunas. Yes, we will talk about managing your three gunas. That's what you can do through lifestyle changes. That means if I hang out in the worldly affairs, what? I'm going to have a lot of rajas because that's what the world is. Movement and just stories about stories. But if my lifestyle is what? Calm, tranquil, peaceful, I create a nice environment, I refuse to, waste time looking at Netflix and movies, which all add more noise to the mind, by the way, then what? Then I'm going to slowly start adding these rajas and tamas back into the mind, which is going to what? Prevent success of moksha. The rishis put it very directly. They said, if you want moksha, the only way is to renounce the world. That's a direct statement. There's no other way, actually. The only way is to... Now, what does that mean to say renounce the world? It means to stop doing those things which are not conducive for purifying the mind. Yeah. See, that's why it's so hard to get out, because we have attachments to the world. We like one thing or another. So we kind of like, I'm going to pursue this, but I've got a little bit of few things to do over there. It doesn't work like that. It's a total renouncing of the world. Period. It's a big statement. It's actually a statement that people don't want to hear, but it needs to be heard, because nobody's going to. Muji's not going to tell you this, because as soon as we tell you need to renounce the world, guess what happens? Everyone's out the door, because it's too much of a stretch, but it's the truth. So we're here just to tell you how it is. Now, renouncing does not mean abandoning physically. Renouncing means what? I am still amidst of my family, of my environment, but the attention is what? Diverted inwards to what? Contemplate and inquire. That means you can still work, you can still do whatever you do, but remember, ultimately, this is your life and this is your journey, and the highest purpose for this journey is what? To realize your nature. That means, why would I spend even 1 minute with some conversation about gossip, Brad Pitt and Angelina and all these movies? Why would I do that? How is that benefiting? It's just more garbage. So that means put your attention on yourself, and that may cause this back and forth. Okay, it's very common. So if it happens, you know who you are, you're totally clear, you're happy, you're joyful, and then the next day all of that is gone. That's completely normal. Just persist. That's all we can say. And we're going to give you karma yoga, which is how to live on earth in order to purify the mind, to reduce your tamas, to reduce your rajas, and cultivate a pure, sattvic, clear mind conducive for the understanding of self-knowledge. Okay. All right, so and so that's what this really is. That is, removing the belief of duality, that I am small, that I am separate. That's what it comes down to. It's just a belief, duality, that you're separate from someone else, that you're separate from an animal or a plant or a tree or the sun or Ishvara. That's just a belief. So our job is just to remove that belief by drilling down and removing these false notions that we have picked up from the world. Very interesting point. If anyone's got kids here, or if you will get kids, now watch what happens with kids. So a kid is born, and then the kid says what? Hey mommy, I'm thirsty. Hey daddy, I'm in pain. If all the mommy and the daddy does is says, no my dear, you're not in pain, your body's in pain. You're not in pain, you're not thirsty, your body is thirsty. That's all a child needs to hear to what? Discriminate between the self and the not self. Atma, anatma. But parents don't do that. Why? Because they don't know. One little statement is all it takes to train the child into this, causing them to become aware that the I is what? Different or separate from the experience appearing in the I. That takes what? 5 seconds. And if we did that, the entire generation would probably be transformed. So that's so you can see how ignorance is operating everywhere. But parents don't do that. So they just reinforce, no, you're in pain, let me give you, a cure. In other words, now I am healthy, now I was sick. In other words, all of these experiences get linked to the I. So you can see what we're doing. We're separating the I from the experience appearing in the I. So that's what moksha is. The identity from the experience, the jiva, to the original awareness, to the original consciousness. All right. So that sums up the revision. Now let's proceed onto the scripture. All right. So we're just going to read to remind from last week. What is unreal? What is unreal doesn't exist, and what is real never ceases to exist. The essence of both is known by the wise. No one can destroy that which pervades everything. The bodies that appear in the self, which is not subject to objectification, in other words, you cannot objectify yourself or consciousness, begin and end anyway. Death is certain for that which is born, and birth is inevitable for that which is dead. Just as a person throws away old clothes and puts on new ones, the self, dwelling within the body, discards old bodies and enters new ones. Okay. All beings are unmanifest before birth, manifest while living, and return to an unmanifest condition after death, only to become manifest again, depending on whether one's self-realized or not. Okay, so if one hasn't realized their nature as the Brahman, then Ishvara will be obligated to provide another body, because why? The person that died believed that they're the body and the mind. So Ishvara is obligated to provide another body and the mind to continue the thread of that thought. That's how it works. It's very simple.
So in the state of moksha, there's no vasanas to continue.
Vasanas, yeah, sure, good question. Good. Vasanas will continue. It doesn't matter if somebody who gains self-knowledge permanent self-knowledge, it doesn't matter if they still have vasanas, because now there's a knowledge that those vasanas don't belong to me. They belong to the mind and the intellect, which is not even mine. It's mithya. So that means there's a typical, a very common conversation that happens in the world is that you have to clear all your, like Patanjali Yoga Sutras, right? You know, they have clear all your chittas, they clear all your mind stuff. It doesn't matter because the mind stuff is not real in the first place. It belongs to mithya. So that means that you don't have to clear all your vasanas, right?
One who performs sadhana and keeps in the state
to purify the mind.
to purify the mind.
That's right, because it's very hard.
That state is that being is that going to manifest again or not?
Is that automatic?
Yeah, I'm asking you, somebody who has gone through and realized the sense that
Yes.
self is
Sure.
all,
Okay.
and
Sure.
I'm the laughing Buddha.
Sure. You will.
I manifest. I'm going to die anyway. The perish from a body point of view. Right?
Yeah.
So what happens to that? Does the journey continue?
The journey continues. Well, when we get to stage 7, there's another level past moksha, and it's called total fulfillment. Okay, so that means it's called nididhyasanam. That means the final stage, even past moksha, is to work on oneself to be a fully mature human being. And that never ends, because to say ending contradicts reality, implies there's no ending to any of this. That's this common thing in relationships. The man always wants to put an end to things, right? But there's no ending to any of this. In other words, the journey continues. But, now here's the answer to your question also. It's no longer a doer enjoyer who's doing it. So the laughing Buddha is what? It's no longer a person there, a doer enjoyer who is what now working on itself. It's now Ishvara to operating on the individual. Okay, so that's the difference. Before, in the stage of ignorance, I, in the stage of ignorance, did for my sake. I did or I do for my happiness. When the doer enjoyer leaves, the inquirer falls away, then the journey still continues, but it's no longer I, that means the Jiva, who is doing it. It's Ishvara operating, and I'm not trying to do things. It's being done for you. That's why there's a common phrase that says there's nothing to do, there's nowhere to go, there's no one to meet. Now you can only say that from a standpoint of knowing, of understanding that I am the self. But from a Jiva's point of view, it sounds like, oh, you know, that sounds like a good deal. I want to attain that status. But it's not a status. It's a natural conclusion of the realized one, where they're just what? You're completely letting go of what? Any effort, because there's no person who needs to take ownership of the doing or enjoying. Okay? Don't worry, we're going to get deeply into the doer enjoyer, because the doer enjoyer is the final stage of the inquirer falling away. In other words, the inquirer asking the question, contemplating the nididhyasanam, also has to fall away. Okay? It's going to become very clear as we go into the preceding sessions. Okay. Now, session 2. The self was never born, nor does it die. It is unlike objects, which having been cease to exist at some time. It is eternal and ever new. It is unaffected when the body dies. If you know the self as timeless and not subject to decay, how can you think you can kill or be killed? Says Krishna to Arjuna. Okay? Any questions about that? The self was never, in other words, consciousness is never born, nor does it die. That's what it means when some, yes, you know, I was never born. Ramana Maharshi, you know, I think on his call it a tomb, whatever it is, they said never born, was never born. I think it was, I think, huh?
Samadhi.
Yeah, never born. So that's what it means. It is unlike objects, which means objects come and go. An object shows up, a person shows up, an experience shows up, an emotion shows up, and then it lasts for a while and then it just dissipates. Into whom? Into me. You have a thought, out of where does a thought come from? Does it come from, does someone like, throw a thought to you, like, here you go? Where does the thought come from? From you, out of you. Right here you are completely doing your own, you're like totally mind your own business, and out of nowhere a thought shows up. Huh? That's what we mean. The thought is mithya, is what? Creation appears in you, consciousness, and then what? The thought is observed for a certain duration, Vishnu, and then we got Shiva, the destroyer of the thoughts. In other words, what? You're still present, and the thought appeared, you're present while the thought is sustained, and you're still present when the thought goes where? Back into you. Right? The thought doesn't go elsewhere, it goes back into you. Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. Creator, sustainer, destroyer. In other words, what? Everything comes out of consciousness and everything goes back into consciousness. Just like we're going to use a spider, this is a new teaching, a spider web analogy. And I'm going to show you this quickly using pictures. All right, where is it? 40. All right. So the spider and the web analogy is going to help us to understand what is the difference between Ishvara 1 and Ishvara 2. Imagine the spider is consciousness. Okay? Why is the spider consciousness? Because out of the spider comes what? The web. And what is the web? Creation. Now, before the web comes out of the spider, that's called Maya. In other words, it's a potential power in the spider to what? To create the web. That's called Maya. And then when that power, which is what? All power and all knowledge, is expressed, then we have what? Ishvara 2. We have creation. That's called the web. So, and then what happens? Interesting, spiders actually take their web back into them. In other words, what? Creation comes out of consciousness and it goes back into consciousness. Just like your thought, it comes out of you and it goes back into you. Microcosm, macrocosm are identical because there is only one here. It's a non-dual reality. That means what happens on a microcosmic scale happens exactly on the macrocosmic scale. Just like when the waker goes to sleep, what happens to all of your thoughts, all of your personality? What happens to that? It goes back into you. And then what happens after deep sleep? It comes back out of you. Same thing, what we call the night of Brahman. That is, creation comes out of consciousness for however many trillion years, and then it goes back into consciousness. That means the entire world is just what? In a constant cycle of appearance, disappearance, appearance, disappearance. And who and what is that factor that knows about the manifest and the unmanifest? Consciousness. That means Ishvara cannot be what? Real. Why? What does real mean? Changing. Because what? Ishvara appears and disappears. Ishvara 2. Either now you see it, now you don't. So that's what we mean by what? Changing and non-changing. But the principle from which Ishvara comes out of is what? The spider consciousness. Okay, are we clear on that? All right. So let's go back. It is eternal and ever new. It is unaffected when the body dies. So what does this mean? It's unaffected. So our traditional or a typical view is that, when I ask questions sometimes, did you create your world? Did you create the world? And sometimes somebody will say, yes, yes I did. Now, it's a common mistake because they're thinking that, I picked up this from the spiritual world, that I am the creator. You're not the creator of the world. Consciousness doesn't create. Consciousness doesn't create. Now, how can this be true when I just said that the web comes out of the spider? Does that not imply that the spider is the cause of the web? Does that not imply that creation is what? An effect of its cause being consciousness? No. Consciousness is not, we call consciousness causeless cause. In other words, it's a cause, but it hasn't caused the cause. So what do I mean by this? Okay. What happens when a person lies down in bed? Does that person cause their dream? Do they go, I'm going to dream in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and poof, the dream starts? Does the person do that? No. In fact, the person doesn't even choose what content is going to appear in the dream. Yes, the dream comes out of your life experience, but you still don't decide what's going to happen in the world. You don't decide how long the dream is going to last, how long the creation is going to last. Consciousness doesn't decide what characters are going to play, how the storyline is going to play out. The consciousness doesn't do anything. The consciousness hasn't even caused the dream. The dream was just what? Poof, out of nowhere. The dreamer lays down, and then out of nowhere, completely unasked for, unsolicited, uncalled for, comes the dream. That's what it means. Consciousness doesn't create. But out of consciousness is a power to create that is all power and all knowledge. You see, that's the paradox. That means consciousness cannot be attributed to ignorance. Consciousness cannot be attributed to anything. Because why? Let's say some massacre happens in my dream, right? And then what? I wake, so let's say I murder somebody in the dream. And then I wake up out of that dream, and then I go to the police station and I say, look, I'd like to confess a murder. I murdered somebody. And then the cops say, oh, all right, so, you know, who was it? Who did you murder? I murdered my friends. All right, and where did this happen? In my dream. And then the cop says, well, I'm sorry, but that happened in your dream. We cannot arrest you, because you didn't do it. Your dream character did it. Yeah, but I was there, sir. I witnessed the death. I killed it. Sir, we understand that, but we cannot arrest you because only if you kill in this dream can we arrest you. So now the question is, which dream is real? Because you were there in that dream, you certainly killed somebody, and when you're in this dream, suddenly all the things that happen in that dream don't apply. But in that dream, everything applied, as if that's the only reality that is. So which reality is true? Is it this one or is it the dream? But what remains? I. That's how you're able to report the dream. Because consciousness, what? Never got touched by the content of the dream. Consciousness is totally innocent. That should be a relief. That means you're not responsible for what happens in life. That's got nothing to do with you. Do you get to choose what happens in your dream? No. You just wake up and you say, oh my God, I had the worst dream. Oh, I had the best dream. But you didn't create or choose or decide what that dream is going to be like, or how it's going to play out, or how it's going to end. You just witnessed the dream being played out. You see? So that means when you can see how the understanding causes us to kind of just to relax. You actually have zero control over what happens. It's totally impersonal here. It's an impersonal creation. Okay. So, if you know the self as timeless and not subject to decay, how can you think you can kill or be killed? Weapons cannot kill it. Fire cannot burn it. Water can't wet it. And the wind is unable to dry it. It is changeless and all-pervading. It is changeless and all-pervading. In other words, sarvagatam and nityam. We heard that last week. All pervasive and eternal. The eyes cannot see it, and it is not an object of thought. Knowing this, you should not grieve for these people, Arjuna. Some see the self as a wonder. Others speak of it as a wonder. Even after hearing about the self, most don't understand it. Why? Why, even after hearing all of this knowledge, why do most still get confused? What do we talk about? The two means of knowledge. Perception and inference. That's the only two means of knowledge that a jiva has. All scientists depend on inference, actually. They see something and they infer, well, according to the effects, there must be a cause. According to the smoke, there must be a fire. According to the certain X-rays, to a certain ultraviolet, there must be what? A certain frequency of light different from the one that we're used to. That's how inference works. But inference and perception means direct perception. You see the picture, that's direct perception. Do not work to know Brahman. Because Brahman is what? More subtle than everything else. It's the subtlest of the subtlest. And what is the subtlest of the subtlest? Nothing below it can know it. Only it can know everything else. That's why we need the Upanishads. And that's why this cannot be figured out on our own. We need what? This wisdom provided by the rishis and orally passed down through the Upanishads. All right. So others hear about it and they don't understand it. In other words, they have different thoughts. That's basically what it's saying. That means they hear about the self and then they have different thoughts about the self. But here we're saying, but what we think about the self has nothing to do with the truth. Because all thinking is what? It's just what? It's just more intellect, more mind. It's just more ideas based on the likes and dislikes of the jiva and based on their limited capacity of understanding. In other words, your thoughts about the self has nothing to do about anything. What you think is the truth. All right, there is only one truth: you, self-existence. In other words, Brahman. What you think is all part of Maya, endless change. So believing what you think, feel, that it's actually true is a big mistake. Always use it to re-identify with the self-awareness. So what this is saying is, whenever we think or whenever we feel something, like I feel like I should or I feel like I shouldn't, guess where that's coming from? The causal body. It's causing you to feel based on the conditions of the stimulus response. In other words, if I see a certain person, you've heard this before, right? You see a certain person and you go, I feel kind of off about that. I don't feel good about them. That has nothing to do with the person. That's just got to do with the person, because somebody else can come along and I can have the best time ever with them. In other words, the person or the world is totally innocent. It's the person's, the jiva's vasanas, which then wallpaper their likes and dislikes and slap it onto the objects that they're perceiving. So this knowledge, this projection and this inference does not apply for the self. That's what it's saying. All right. Finally, from a standpoint of your duty, so this is Krishna speaking to Arjuna now. Finally, from a standpoint of your duty, you should be grateful for the great opportunity this war presents. We'll investigate why. There is nothing more auspicious for a warrior than an unsolicited righteous war. Okay, guys, now we're not speaking about an actual gory war, because the Bhagavad Gita is a metaphor for the battle between the spirit and the matter. Am I the spirit or am I the matter? Am I this physical body or am I something that's beyond the physical body? That's what the Bhagavad Gita is addressing. It's not addressing an actual gory war on two sides and they're killing each other. All right. If you live, you will enjoy all the pleasures of the earth and death is an open gate to heaven. So Krishna here is giving some ego reasons to Arjuna, because Arjuna is still a samsari and is still thinking from what's in it for me? Why should I? Why should I fight? Because remember, Arjuna sat down and he doesn't want to fight. So Krishna is trying to get across to him by providing some ego reasons why to go forward. If you refuse to fight, that is to perform your duty, you will only suffer. Okay, now why would Arjuna suffer if he doesn't perform or she doesn't perform his or her duty? Because Arjuna is faced with a situation, and Arjuna is the leader of the army, and therefore if Arjuna doesn't go forward, he's actually endorsing what? Adharma, immoral values. Because Duryodhana, who has cheated, lied, and just stolen everything from the Pandavas, what? It just keeps on going. He doesn't know when to stop. That's the side of us that just greedy, the ego part. That's Duryodhana. So by Arjuna refusing to proceed forward, then Arjuna is essentially saying, I let Duryodhana destroy the society. Now how does that stand up to Sarvam Brahmaha, I am the whole? It doesn't. In other words, it's Arjuna's duty to do or to perform what he's being asked of, because Arjuna is what? Upholding dharma. Duryodhana is adharmic, and Arjuna's job is to uphold morality and virtue in the society. And if Arjuna refuses, it's as good as saying, no thank you child, I choose not to take care of you, to your own child. It's as good as saying that. Okay. Okay, so there's a little comment. So you, Jiva, own the world something. You have an obligation to fulfill, a duty. Serve the situation that is being asked of you. That is your swadharma. We talked about swadharma, your personal responsibilities. And not what the society, parents, or spouse told you. Give life what it wants. This is all God asks of you for a successful life. So if you were to ask God, how do I live a successful life? The simple answer would be, serve me. Me means the whole. What? According to the appropriate action that is being asked of you in the moment. In Arjuna's case, he was being asked to lead the army and fight, right? So, and there's a beautiful line that says, Krishna says to Arjuna, it is better to die than, it says, it is better to die and than not perform your own dharma. That means if I am following somebody else's rules, what my parents or whoever it is tells me what to do, it's actually better to die. That's what Krishna says. Why? Because one is not living according to their dharma, to their swadharma. They are living according to somebody else's dharma. That's what they want. That's what's good. That's what they think is good for you. That's not good for you. That's what they think is good for you. Therefore, Krishna says, it is better to die than to live somebody else's dharma. Think about that. And then what's the world doing today? We're all telling each other what you should do. Here's the advice I have for you. Here's what you should do. No. That's only coming from my own vasanas, to my own expectations of what I think you should do. It's got nothing to do with what you should actually do. Only you know what you should do. So that means what? Know your swadharma and follow your swadharma. That is duty that is personal to you. I have actually a very good example I'll tell you after we read this. Ishvara says, serve me because everything you value is given to you only by me, including all your joys, all of your knowledge, and moksha. Everything's given to you by Ishvara. And so that's why Ishvara says, serve me in return. And I gave you birth to you. I sustain your every breath and heart beat. You live only because of me, says Ishvara too. I am the creator, Brahma, sustainer, Vishnu, and destroyer, Shiva, of this universe. So that means that everything you value in life, whatever is important to you, is given to you by the Lord, by Bhagavan, the one that blesses you. And by refusing to give back to that one, to Bhagavan, that's essentially giving the finger to the very principle because of which you get to enjoy life. You see? Okay. So the two essential points here are: one, follow your swadharma and not what the society or parents have told you. And number two, serve the Lord. That's what the Lord is at. That's what Krishna is saying. Serve me in return. In this case, serve me by killing these people. Because why? You're upholding dharma. If you don't do this, then they're just going to what? Collapse as a society. All right? I actually have a very interesting personal situation. Is the last person that I was in a relationship with, I knew that my swadharma has changed. In other words, I was in a relationship with a person who had, woman who had 2 children. So I was like their stepfather. And I knew that my swadharma was starting to change. I didn't belong there. So what did I do? I knew that I had to what? Get out to continue my journey. So that is what? The benefit of, you got to take that stance, that courageous move, no matter how attached you are. Otherwise, you will never move forward. It's hard, I know, but you got to do it. And it sounds cruel to hear this. To some people say, oh my God, how could you? How dare you? So what? That's their opinion. You need to follow your swadharma and you will move forward like you wouldn't believe. That's the greatest teaching that you can get from this. But what do? We stay in a relationship, we get attached and we try to make it work, but we can't. You know why? Because you're no longer in the appropriate dharmic situation. You have moved on. Your mind's moved on, your intellect's moved on, everything's moved on. That person is, and that situation is no longer supporting your growth nor their growth. So you're also suppressing their growth. You see? So, with Karma Yoga, we will see how it's important to live our Swadharma. Okay, let's close. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet, om shanti shanti shantihi. May all be happy, may all be free from illness, may all behold good things, may no one suffer. Okay, and next week we'll finish this and get into what is consciousness, attributes of consciousness. It's good to memorize this. Alright, so remember the point of this is to contemplate it. It's not just to listen and then just to go out. Use the teaching that made sense, and then that's what inquiry is, inquiring about this knowledge. So your whole life becomes an inquiry. Yeah.
A question can I ask?
All right, sure.
There is this concept of mukti.
Jiva mukti?
Mukti, yeah. There's just liberation.
Yeah, a liberated jiva while still alive, yeah.
Yes, still alive. So just that mukti, based on today's understanding, you said that there's going to be a continuation of birth and death, right? So is that mukti a cessation of that cycle?
A jiva mukti is a cessation of birth and death. The reason is there is no reason for a jiva to return back if a jiva wants nothing in this world. So the jiva comes back only because they identify or they see something as worthy of coming back to. You see, so that's why you have to neutralize your likes and dislikes, right? But when you realize this, actually I'll tell you, like Chinmaya said this very beautifully before we go. A boy came up, you know Chinmayananda, Swami Chinmayananda? I came up to Chinmaya and said, Chinmaya, how were you able to renounce the world? And Chinmaya noticed the boy chewing bubblegum and said, what are you chewing? The boy said, bubblegum. And then Chinmaya said, and when are you going to spit that out? And the boy said, when it loses its essence. And then Chinmaya said, I looked, I searched, and I found no essence in this world. and so I spat the whole world out. Because all the essence that the world has comes from me, consciousness. Yeah. So that's how he was able to renounce the world, by seeing that the joys in the world are actually coming from me and not from the objects. And so therefore, Jiva Mukti has there's just no logical, rational reason for one to come back.
So the ultimate of sadhana is the mukti. The ultimate...
Jiva Mukti is enlightened one, yeah, moksha. Yeah.
So moksha, mukti are the same?
Moksha and Jiva Mukti are the same, yeah. Yeah.
Just trying to get the terms.
They're synonymous.
Yeah.
Moksha is defined as a Jiva Mukti, and Jiva Mukti is one moksha. Yeah. So you can see why the world becomes easier to renounce, because the more knowledge you gain, the more you realize how much Maya is tricking us, causing us to add value to the world.
You always fall for it.
We always fall for it. It's so easy to fall for it.
Then you realize it, and then you come back. But every time you get stronger. Though.
Every time, and there's so many reasons to stay here, and because one can spend just a lifetime in just one field. You just get into geography, you're like, oh, these plants and animals, archaeology, you can just explore that, and then spend another life exploring quantum physics, another life exploring, art. So that's how Maya, we call it beautiful ignorance, because it's beautiful, but it's ignorance because it's duality.
Just want to share with you the application of these classes I've made in the past few weeks. So usually I go for interviews for a change of job, and there is a lot of anxiety and stuff. Usually I go through that.
Yeah.
But having been to this class, I was able to understand that I hardly had any anxiety for going interviews. I think I did my duty to my extent.
Duty, good. Duty.
But now I'm in a real pickle where both the interviews are there. I don't know which one to pick really. So it's a different kind of thing. Now it's I'm not even making the decision now.
Good, yeah. It means I'm glad to hear that. It means the knowledge is working slowly.
Yeah. So just want to thank you for that in the past few weeks.
Well, thank the Upanishads and my teachers. None of this is attributed to me. It comes from my teachers and these rishis. We got to thank them. So I send all that back to Bhagavan. Yeah.